very serious subjects, and I will continue to speak out and be an advocate for the abused. But I also felt in my writing it was time to lighten up. Okay, first of all, let's talk about this amazing cover. I had this idea of what I wanted on the cover of this book. I wanted this 68 Chevy Impala coupe with a rust velvet sofa in the back and Nathaniel making a getaway on the cover. And I have represented hundreds of artists over the years, and I knew of the one that could do this. Arden Von Hager created this cover for me, did a wonderful painting in pastel. I could not have been happier. Now let's talk about this sexy author pick. Okay, now I could have had a new author shot done, but let's face it, I'm fat and I'm old. The bulk of the robberies that take place in this book are done in the 70s and 80s, and I thought, how perfect to have a 70s photo. So my college roommate, Larry Ray, took this photo of me in 1978 at Opryland Amusement Park. And I will tell you, I still have those sunglasses. They are somewhere in my house. I have torn my house apart. I could not find them. I wanted to have them today to put them on to show you and prove to you that I could still fit in something from the 70s. But you're going to have to just take my word on that. I have always loved interior design. I studied design. I worked as a designer for many years, even won a couple awards. I always would check out furnished models or designer show houses. In fact, I even had the opportunity to design rooms for the Junior League show houses at one point. And I had this amazing opportunity to design an entire residence for the Home Builders Association Parade of Homes when it was at Burton Hills, right around the corner several years ago. I am old enough that I have lived through the color trends of avocado, harvest gold, chocolate brown, peach and blue, and mauve and teal. So I have worked in the design field. I know other designers. We all have stories to tell. So it wasn't too difficult to write about a group of friends and use my design experiences as the backdrop on this. And to think about their limited budgets but fabulous taste, and how they could acquire things that they could not buy. So to put myself in the lead character's role, if I went into a furnished model and I saw a side table or a lamp, I would think, how could I get away with that? What would it take? But then if I wanted a sofa or say a dining room table, I couldn't do that on my own. So then the character would have to trust a friend to help him. And most likely in that situation, the friend would want something out of it too. And so that is how the premise of this came about. In the time periods, the 60s through the 80s, which is before home security alarm systems were commonplace, before neighborhood watches, back when telephones were attached to the wall. So it was easier, I think, to get away with things at this point. Now, my wonderful editor and I, after writing 2 nonfiction books, we decided that we needed to put a novel on the front of this to remind people that it is fiction, or they would be reading and go, oh my God, he was a thief too? And yet, friends are always already doing that. So several of my friends have had the opportunity to go ahead and read the book, and some of them can kind of see me in this lead role. But let's face it, it is my voice that is talking in this. My college roommate, the one who took this wonderful photo, read it. And so the lead character's name is Ricky, and his college roommate is Greg. And so one morning I get a text from my college roommate that says, "Good morning, Ricky. It's Red. Call me." And so I called him, and we laughed about it. He thought it was fun and all of this, and he loved the fact I did do a nod to his mother's signature dish that she would create. But then he started correcting me, and he said, "Now, you know, I didn't move back when so-and-so, and they didn't move in." I said, "Fiction? This is fiction. I just built the character kind of around people that I know." And then there's my college girlfriend who read the book and said, "I believe I was at that wedding that you talk about." And she was. So I take these comments as compliments, that they feel that it is so real and all. Now, Donna the Prom Date, who all of you have come to know and love through these past book events and all, was unable to be here. And she usually flies in from California, but she had just dealt with mother issues and had decided to fly home. But she came back with, "This was so authentic." There is kind of a running joke through this thing of nerves getting the best of these thieves in the middle of the night and some digestive problems and all. And so she said, "That just seems so real," and I kind of wondered how you would know that if you didn't do that. And I said, "Well, I did go from personal experience, but I was a music major in college, and at the end of each semester we would have juries, and the juries would consist of the faculty sitting there in the auditorium with the loudest pencils you have ever seen as they're taking notes. And we, as students, would give a list of songs that we had memorized and we were prepared to perform. I was never prepared to perform everything on my list. So my stomach would be doing flip-flops because I knew they would call on one of those songs, and by God, they did, every single time. And so, yes, those nerves and that getting upset. And then when I told her that, she said, "Well, yeah, okay, I get it," because when she first started speaking in front of groups of like 500, her nerves also would get the best of her. And she said, "You know, I would take something kind of preventative before I got up there to speak so I wasn't running off the stage in the middle of that." Now, one of my artist friends, my dear friend that I have represented for so many years, had a hard time separating me from the lead character as well, and kept asking, "How did you know this?" and all. And the thing is, I explained to her. I mean, she said it almost felt like a how-to book. In case you want to do anything on your own. But I explained to her, and it's the same thing that I've explained to any of you. We all have our things that we are, our experiences, things that we are capable of doing and all. And for her, as an artist, she studied art. She works with galleries. She has done art shows. She has been in competitions. She knows other artists. I'm sure swapped war stories with artists, as we all have. So if she were to sit down and write a book that dealt in the art world, she would have all of that experience to give you the feeling of what was going on. And then if you think about the lead character maybe being an art forger, you would put yourself in their place and think, how could I get away with it? What could I do? With the experience I know, how could I do that? And so that is kind of where I came from on all of this. So I resurrected design experiences. There were stories to tell, and stories that I'd swapped with other designers through the year. But I built this book around those adventures. And I visualized friends in these positions, their mannerisms, their interactions. Not that they were doing what I had them do in the book, but if they were in a scene and I could see the friend that I was visualizing, I could see how they would interact, what their mannerisms would be on that. So it was a whole lot of truth, a whole lot of enhanced truth, and then some made-up stuff to create the story. But realistically, I did have an estate sale, which is kind of what is in this book, and it was a estate sale for my father. And so some of those comments that happened at an estate sale, I was able to kind of bring into the story. And as I told you, I did one of the pray-a-thons, so I could kind of rely on those experiences. And as I revealed in the second book, I had been in a relationship with an alcoholic, so that relationship with the lead character was something I could talk with from experience. Now, as far as me actually being the lead character, those of you who have read the second book, you know what my life was like. So where in there was time for any of this stuff? So it's a whole lot of fact, fiction, and fantasy. Because clearly I'm not a thief. I am not tall. I am not thin. I'm not blonde. I'm not sarcastic or snarky. And a bad example, I don't know. Go with what you know. Okay, the amazing people with JKS Literary agents who have represented my last couple of books and have helped get the word out there, get interviews, get podcasts and reviews and all for the book have been so instrumental. And Flat Tire Julie is responsible for helping me through all of that, as in JKS. And so this previous book, they were lining up so many things, I was having a hard time keeping it straight. And so I would put it on the calendar, and then about 2 days before something was going to happen, then I would research who are these people, how did they approach an interview, so I could be prepared. Well, one of them that was coming up was with chapter 1. And when I looked at that, it's like, oh, okay, so the author reads chapter 1 and then you discuss it. Well, I immediately started practicing over and over because I did not want to stumble over my own words. And so the time came and to Skype, and the gentleman said, now what are you going to read? And I said, well, chapter 1, of course. He said, oh, you can read whatever you want. I said, listen, buddy, I have practiced chapter 1, and by God, we're going to get chapter 1. Now, granted, the second book is the most personal thing I have ever written, and so it was my story. And so I read chapter 1, and at the end of it, he kind of did a, wow, it's one thing to read what someone has written. It's another thing to hear the author read in their own voice, their own words. Now, this book is not the same type of book at all. But as I kept trying to think about what to read, to pull out from the book, I thought, well, for those who haven't read the book, and I read this section, you don't know how we got to that point, or why this has happened. And so, taking that in consideration, for those of you who've read the book, I'm sorry you have to hear it again, but for those of you who have not, I'd like to get you started. I'm going to read chapter 1. Chapter 1, present day. Excuse me, could you tell me a little something about this table? I thought to myself that I can't remember the backstories for all of my pieces, and often find that after so many years and so many episodes that I have become occasionally forgetful and easily confused. But you can be assured that everything of mine comes with an interesting providence. My moving sale had begun nearly 2 hours earlier than advertised, thanks to those damn early bird shoppers. Neighbors and strangers were anxious to offer diddly squat for my assorted collectibles. You see, I had finally reached the point of no longer wanting the biggest and best, and it was time to downsize, not only in square footage, but in furnishings as well. My arthritic knees no longer enjoyed climbing the stairs to my bedroom. The extravagant, over-the-top clutter that I'd surrounded myself with for so long felt suffocating. Previously, it had given me joy, but now I no longer felt the need to entertain the pretentious queens I had called friends at one time. Some of them had died. Others are in poor health, and yet a few still struggled to keep up appearances. However, makeup and soft lighting cannot completely disguise the wrinkles in dated wardrobes. And believe me, 30 plus years ago, they would not have been caught dead driving a decade-old economy car. Presentation was everything. Fake it till you make it was our motto, even if it left many drowning and dead. Let's face it, my ragtag group of friends and acquaintances had gotten old. Most could not or would not try to keep up with fashion trends or the latest designers, and do not even get me started on technology. Of course, there were always those who would continue to pretend that they were still in their prime and had the finances to impress the type of young men who only saw dollar signs and not the aging hand of the one who wrote their generous checks. And yes, even I would have loved for someone older to have been philanthropic to me when I was a pretty young thing. But now, it just seems sort of sad. My moving sale was in full swing, and fortunately, I had hired the professional team from Roberta Ann's Trash and Treasures estate sale to organize and price everything. Roberta Ann and the girls were on hand to host the event as well. They had worried that it would make me sad seeing my possessions hauled away, and suggested that it might be best if I did not hang around, but actually I felt free. Not only was I getting rid of the clutter, but I was also saying goodbye to the past, which often had me fearful of being caught, arrested, and hauled off to jail. In fact, I had always wondered if the statute of limitations would expire before I did. Folding tables were set up inside and out to display small items and linens. Some pieces of furniture had been moved outside because it appeared that the weather had decided to cooperate. I absolutely refused to have my entire home open to the unwashed masses, and yet 3 rooms had so much in them that it was just easier to remove my personal items and leave the furniture, lamps, and art in place. And since some of the girls were watching over the interior, as well as having some doors shut with signs saying "Do not enter," I decided to grab a lawn chair, find a spot under the shade of my constantly shedding magnolia tree, and enjoy the show. I said, "Excuse me, I was asking if you could tell me anything about this table," she repeated herself. A smile came to my face. For a brief moment, I thought back to when and how that piece was procured. "Yes, I believe I can," I replied. The whiny voice asking the question belonged to a too skinny, Botox, bleach blonde woman in painted-on yoga pants. She was one of several that morning, rummaging through my baubles offered in my moving sale. I wanted to tell her that her yoga pants were the equivalent of body paint, basically hiding nothing. But instead, with a sincere smile on my face, I began to tell the swizzle stick of a woman the history of the table. Well, let's say a version of the history. According to me, Ricky, the award-winning successful interior designer, as opposed to the other me, the thief in the night, Nathaniel. Oh my dear, that is one of my favorite pieces. It breaks my heart to let it go, but I just don't have room in my new place, I said with false sincerity. I bought that piece new over 40 years ago at Palmer's Fine Furniture. Do you remember that store? They carried only the best of the best, I continued, knowing that I had her full attention. Oh yes, my parents used to shop there when I was a child, but it was long gone by the time I was ready to furnish my first home, she said, as if she actually believed that. I thought to myself that maybe her face looked young enough to pull off that line, but the age spots on her spindly arms led me to think she was a good 20 years older than she was imagining herself to be. An aging trophy wife trying desperately not to be replaced. Regardless, I was just as adept at lying as she was and anxious to sell her a piece or two. I fell in love with that table and knew it would be a wonderful complement in my room. It was also the favorite of the one who eventually broke my heart, which has made it a painful reminder over the years. I have had such conflicted feelings in loving this table, but seeing it connected to the hurt that had been inflicted upon me, I said as I spread it on thick and creamy. "Oh my, I'm so sorry. I did not mean to make you relive painful memories," she tried to convey with concern. "No, I am the one who should be sorry. You do not need to know all of that nonsense. All you need to know is that it is a beautiful and well-loved table, offered at a ridiculously affordable price simply because, for me, it has always been a reminder of a difficult period in my life," I said, coming in for the home run. I could could tell that she was trying to show sympathy on her face, but with everything frozen in time. All she could do was pull off that startled, surprised look, which can happen from too much refreshing by a plastic surgeon. It is a good price, and you know, I feel that I should buy it just so you can move on without this constant reminder of a tragic love. She said as I was mentally congratulating myself and thinking my performance was worth a curtain call. Thank you, my dear. Cash or check.